Welcome to the 35th episode of Vital Questions. As always, I'm your host, Che Guerrero with
La Co-Host.
La Co-Host. This episode, we have a guest.
Yes.
All right. We're going to get to the guest in a minute. 2 weeks in a row with guests.
Listen, we're doing it up. It's good times at Vital Questions.
We're bringing in the knowledge and we're bringing in the experts. And we
Mhm.
wanted to bring this expert in specifically, New York Dominican. Because with everything going on in the news with the Epstein files, and it has really dominated the conversation as it should,
Mhm.
we didn't want to approach this from, getting into the crimes and everything because we don't have the bandwidth for that.
Right. Yeah.
But one thing we have noticed, if you read the title of this episode, it seems like the criminal justice system is made for the wealthy. And that's what we're going to ask. Is the criminal justice system made for the wealthy?
Yeah, because one of the biggest news that's come out since we last spoke were the additional Epstein files that were released. And to say that they were disgusting would be an understatement. At this point, I think a lot of people have seen a lot of those files. And I'm not bringing up those files specifically. I'm just bringing up two of the big perps that are involved in this. Because we don't want to add more trauma to any SA victims that are experiencing even more trauma through all this, especially Epstein's victims. But we did think it's important, in order to give context to today's episode, to briefly talk about what came out of the recent Epstein files, without, again, directly pulling up the disturbing evidence that, again, I'm sure most people have already seen. So let's get into some specifics. Looking at the NBC News article entitled "DOJ Releases Millions of Pages of Additional Epstein Files," dated January 30th, 2026. The DOJ released more than 3.5 million pages, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images, which is massive compared to their previous releases. And this isn't everything the DOJ has on Epstein, as NBC reports. These are only half of the files. And these files were also, to surprise of no one, mainly redacted, right? Initially, they, of course, were heavily redacted.
And then badly redacted, and then not properly redacted.
It's been a lot. It's been a mess with this. I don't know who taught them how to redact and thought that, hey, let's just put a Sharpie to this and let's put a black little box over it. But yeah, we found this image from the Guardian's article entitled "First Thing, DOJ Accused of Cover-Up After Lawmakers View Unredacted Epstein Files." This is dated February 10th, 2026. Since the initial redacted release, the DOJ has allowed members of Congress to view some of the unredacted files, with more alleged abusers being named. The DOJ claimed that the files were originally so redacted because they were trying to protect the identities of the victims. Meanwhile, surprise again, per this NPR article entitled "DOJ Admits Redaction Errors in Epstein Docs," while names in files face scrutiny, dated February 6th. It turns out that even though they claimed they were trying to protect the identities of these victims, even with the thousands of pages almost fully redacted, the DOJ still managed to, quote, mistakenly release information of the victims in these files. Yet they spent so much time blacking out everything, and the names of the people they were supposed to protect, of course, came out.
Well, I think that tells you who they spent time protecting.
Yeah.
They protected the abusers,
Correct.
the criminals, because when, I don't know if you have this, but when members of Congress tried to take off the redacted part of the abusers, it was redacted twice or redacted with white lines. So, man, they really know how to redact
when they need to.
But for the victims, not a shred of respect when it comes to protecting them.
Of course not. I mean, there was a recent hearing where the victims were there with members of Congress, and a lot of people couldn't even look them in the face because they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So NPR went on to describe some of the content of the files. I will just summarize them. Fortunately, these aren't as graphic. It includes Elon Musk emailing Epstein about visiting the island, images of former Prince Andrew leaning over a woman lying on the floor, allegedly at Epstein's Manhattan residence, and Deepak Chopra and Epstein emailing about Chopra finding a, quote, cute Israeli blonde for Epstein. Yeah. So these are just more of the later pieces of evidence that came out of the recent releases. So without going into too much detail, the recent file releases also reportedly contain evidence relating to, allegedly, human trafficking, prostitution, child sex abuse, rape, and even cannibalism, just to name a few.
Hmm.
So, with all of this, everyone has rightfully been asking, why haven't all of Epstein's associates that were involved in this criminal activities been arrested or at a minimum investigated? Especially when people of color are being chased in the streets, being put in concentration camps, disappeared, or flat out murdered for allegedly being undocumented, which now just seems to mean not looking white.
Not looking white.
Right.
And yeah.
So while our
Yes.
guest today may not be able to answer that specific question, her experience and insight might be able to shed some light on today's vital question. Is the criminal justice system made for the wealthy? She is a career-long public defender who has represented clients in Queens County and Manhattan in New York City. Let's welcome Millie.
Welcome to the show, Millie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Che.
Thank you for joining us on such a heavy topic, but for such an important conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
to answer your question, La Co-Host, yeah, that's exactly how the criminal justice system works, at least in New York City.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
And we can't wait to hear about it's just a weird
It's such a weird
like I can't wait to talk more about how terrible it is. So before we get into it, here are my handy dandy disclaimers that everyone loves to hear from the lawyer.
There
Please
you go.
remember that, as always, same as with me, Millie's opinions are her own and are not representative of anyone else's. Even though Millie and I are lawyers, her thoughts, just like mine, are not legal advice. As always, if you have any legal questions, please consult with a qualified attorney that you speak to directly and engage, and maybe have a retainer with and have an arrangement. Don't assume lawyers are trying to give you advice. Just don't.
That's
There
kind of
you
cool
go.
disclaimer to have. Like, as a comedian, I can be like, whatever joke I give you, do not come back to me if they don't work. Like,
You know?
as a disclaimer.
I'm not liable. I didn't tell you anything. You haven't paid me a retainer. I don't know anything about your case, so no.
But this is at least good, insight
Yeah,
into how
right.
the world looks. Because honestly, Millie, as we'll get into this a lot more. Being, you being a public defender, when I saw these files, I was really angry in so many ways because we are made to believe that the wealthy, almost in a way, don't commit crimes. Like, once you get a certain amount of money, that somehow you are this divine person who does no more wrong. And I think that's what the Epstein files have done, is just shattered that illusion that wealthy people don't commit crimes, and it's poor people and undocumented people and immigrants are the real criminals of society.
That's right. And I think the big difference is the kind of policing that we do and
Mm.
the kind of crimes that folks are being charged with. You just don't hear of folks of color being accused of cannibalism on Fordham Road.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen.
That's why they have
They-
to make up the stories.
right.
Right.
That's why they
might
have to
be-
make up the stories.
Exactly. They might be moving a couple kilos. You know what I'm saying?
To survive.
To survive.
To survive. That's because that's the crazy thing.
That's like one of the major differences is that, like, there's a difference between committing a crime or making a mistake, like I like to phrase to the judges, for survival versus satisfying some sort of kink or some sort of delusion or mental illness. Because let's be real, that this is not normal. We should be outraged. We should be outraged.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so before we dive into Epstein and all that, just for our listeners, can you share a little bit about yourself, Millie, and explain, I guess, generally what a public defender is for people who may not know what it is?
So I'm going to start by saying public defenders are criminal defense attorneys. There are many times where I meet my clients and they're like, so when are you going to become a real lawyer?
Oh, no.
What?
No, sir.
way.
What?
No, sir. I went to law school just
Correct.
like those folks in, last name, and last name associates. I took the bar exam just like they did. But public defenders are folks that really that have a purpose in life, right? We're doing free work, right? And we don't see a single dollar for the services that we provide. and we get our cases from the courts. So it's crazy that we're having this conversation today, because what happens is I go to court, I get a stack of cases that have gone through the NYPD and the district attorney's office. And so by the time I get the case, it's already gone through several hands, right? I meet the client, I say, hey, so-and-so, you're charged with assault, or you're charged with criminal possession of a controlled substance, whatever the crime is. And I go through the details of the complaint. They're saying that on this day, at this time, in this location, that you did X. I take the case from start to finish. So whether that case results in a plea, maybe we're pleading to a lesser charge, whether that results in going to trial, right? I've done everything. I've negotiated. I've even had my clients go through treatment court. So like if I have a client who's chemically addicted to to any substance, heroin, crack cocaine, methamphetamines, anything like that, opioids, that's a big one nowadays. I can help clients go through treatment courts. So I'm there from the day that it gets assigned from the courts until sentencing or whatever that looks like. So yeah, I've joined the Gideon's army of public defenders.
So you're like, to like clarify to people, when you watch like Law and Order, and they go, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. If you can afford an attorney, we will provide one for you. And that's me. When Millie comes in.
That's me.
Yeah. So you're where the federal government is obligated, the city, the state, or whatever, obligated to give you a lawyer to represent you in whatever they're charging and what they're charging you with.
Right. That's right. And that's good that you brought up both levels of government, because if you're charged with a federal crime, you're also entitled to a public defender. There's no difference, right? That's your Fifth Amendment. That's protected under the United States Constitution, and it's also protected under the New York State Constitution. So regardless of where you get charged, if you're charged in federal court or if you're charged in state court, you will get assigned a public defender if you can't afford your own attorney.
Yeah, and for, I guess, everyone listening, Millie, can you confirm whether or not your immigration status has any factor in that?
In terms of like getting assigned?
Like getting access to an attorney if you're charged with a criminal charge.
No, that's the beautiful thing about it, right? So the Fifth Amendment clearly states every person it's regardless of citizenship status, is entitled. It has the right to have an attorney present. And that's under the Fifth Amendment. And so it does not delineate. It doesn't say if you were born in such and such country, you don't get an attorney. No. If you're charged with a crime, you get an attorney, period.
Yeah, that's what it says now. And I'm very happy to hear that. But as you were saying that, I was like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that. Because, I know a lot of people are aware that in immigration court, they're not obligated. Well, no, they don't give you a lawyer at all. Because, and that's actually leads to 5 and 6 year olds having to represent themselves in court, which is a whole nother horrendous case.
Correct.
But I'm glad that at least when it comes to criminal court, yes, regardless of immigration status, you have the right to an attorney, which is awesome. Might not be, somebody as great as you, but at least there is somebody there to represent them, which is better outcome than not having one.
Yeah. And it's important for people to know. So, and it's something I've said before, but as a non-litigator, I'm like, listen to the experts, guys. Like, the expert confirmed it.
Yeah, I mean, I've represented students from other countries who are here on a student visa. I've represented people who are seeking asylum from another country. I've represented people who've been deported and snuck back in.
Yeah,
busy. It takes all kinds. That's a city. That's a community.
That's
right. The world.
So it's funny. I was going to, as you know, ask you like, hey, so what are your thoughts on the Epstein files? But I just feel like it's so egregious that we all know people should be already being investigated and arrested, and like I think
I at least would like to, if I may, just at least to know, just I guess somebody. I don't know if we're going to ask you this later, but somebody who represents a lot of people, low income and things like that, how does seeing the rich and powerful, especially a lot of these people, New York was their playground.
Mhm.
A lot of their crimes are in the same city where you're trying to protect people who are sometimes just trying to eat
Mhm.
and getting, criminalized for that.
It
Mhm.
angers me.
Mm.
It's frustrating. It's the reason why there's so much outrage right now,
Mhm.
because these people would not have gotten away with it unless there was coordination, unless there was cooperation. Like there's just no way. We're talking decades
Mm.
of all these crimes that we now have proof of in all these files, and at the same time I have to worry about my 28-year-old kid who's charged with possession of crack.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm.
The allegations are that this dates as far back as the early 2000s, maybe even the 90s and 80s.
80s,
Yeah.
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 It is 2026. We're talking 30 to 40
Yeah.
years of this
Mhm.
happening. You mean to tell me that no one else knew about this? No one else from law enforcement, no one else knew that this was happening?
Right.
Impossible. I
Right.
don't
Impossible.
believe it. I refuse to
Impossible.
believe it,
Right.
because
And
they have their eyes and ears in on everything.
Yep.
everything. Everything. They know every single meal Martin Luther King Jr. had while he was alive. Like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Just to keep tabs of everything. But you tell me you don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's who they
Right.
choose to investigate and go
Yeah.
after and call a criminal and stamp a terrorist and all that stuff.
That's right. Selective policing.
Eh,
Selective policing. Mm.
Y'all just previewing stuff. I love it.
Oh, let's go.
So, in talking about whether or not the criminal justice system is made for the wealthy, Millie, when we caught up earlier this week, you mentioned how a lot of judges you've come across in your career have been prior prosecutors, right?
Yeah.
And it was actually hard to find New York specific data on that without like myself reviewing the current list of criminal court judges and their bios and all that stuff. Who got time for that, right?
Yeah.
But I did find some other kind of information at the federal level, which I thought was interesting. So we're pulling up a Brennan Center's update, May 2024 update of its state Supreme Court diversity study. At state Supreme Courts across the country, they found that state Supreme Courts across the country lack racial, ethnic, gender, and professional diversity on the bench.
Hmm.
In looking at the study, the Brennan Center's updated study found that while over 40% of the US population is made up of people of color, quote, in 19 states, no justices identify as a person of color, including in 13 states where people of color make up at least 20% of the population. Some of the other key facts of the study were across 50 states and Washington, D.C., just 20% of state Supreme Court seats are held by people of color. Men hold 57% of high court seats.
Hmm.
There are no women judges on the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. In 5 states, there's only one woman on the Supreme Court bench. There are 25 states in which there are no women of color state Supreme Court justices, and 13 states in Washington, D.C., in which there is only one woman of color on the Supreme Court bench. Lastly, and Millie, to your point, 38% of sitting justices are former prosecutors, while only 10% are former public defenders. So this is at a federal level, but it's interesting, Millie, that you brought this up because it was honestly shocking to hear it. And in a place so diverse as New York, to have our bench not representative of the people in front of them, right? Like of the people that are their defendants that are trying to speak to the power that is judges.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering if you can speak to how you've seen this data play out in your career as a public defender.
So in New York, can't speak for other states, but in New
Mhm.
York, there's a residency requirement for a sitting judge to be able to preside over any of the 5 boroughs: Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island. I'm missing one, Manhattan.
You
Um,
remember
the
Staten
most
Island over
important one
Manhattan?
where I work in, right? So in order for a judge to be able to preside over that county, they have to live somewhere within the 5 boroughs.
Mm.
And that's because, New York understands that if you're going to be judged right? If you're going to be sentenced by someone, that person should be a part of the community that they serve, right? But that's where it stops. There's no type of requirement for there to be some sort of racial, religious, gender type of, to your point, that's representative of the community that they serve, right? The only requirement is you got to live within the 5 boroughs, right?
Oh, wow.
That's the only, I mean, I'm downplaying it. I'm sure there's more requirements,
but to have a diversity bench is not really something that they're striving to do.
Correct. And there's this prosecutor to bench pipeline that's just not accessible to public defenders. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so while prosecutors are absolutely positively important, and we know this is illustrated in the Epstein files, right? Prosecutors are absolutely necessary for the function of society. Public defenders are as well. And the reason being is because the government doesn't always get it right. And we know this, right? We know this because of forensic science. We know this because time has taught us that there has been false confessions, that people have been exonerated because of DNA evidence. People have been exonerated because of witnesses that are giving testimony from years ago and they can't make an identification. And so it is important that not only our bench is diverse in race, gender, religion, but also in professional backgrounds. It's important. We need that. We need more. We need the sensitive judge to be up there and understand you're a human being. This is horrible what you did. I'm not going to cause more damage by ruining the rest of your life either.
So when, again, because I'm not in the legal field at all, so to make sure that people kind of understand why it was important. So a prosecutor in itself sort of is more of the person that works for the, because you both work for the state, the city, but a prosecutor is more of the person who is like, you committed the crime, we're charging you with these. They're a lot more, if you will, the aggressive party in trying to get the conviction, trying to get the person in jail, trying to put him away.
They would be like the plaintiff in the situation, right? Like if we in the regular plaintiff defendant kind of situation dynamic that most people understand, they would be like the plaintiff.
That's right. So the difference is both prosecutors and public defenders get paid by the state. Your taxes, when it gets, when you see federal and state tax being removed from your check, it goes towards that. It goes not only to your police officers and your fire department, but it also goes to the legal system. That includes prosecutors and public defenders. The difference is that prosecutors, like you said, work for the state. The caption, the name, the title of the case in a state case is the people of the state of New York versus name, whoever that is. Public defenders, we're seen as contractors. We have a contract with the state, meaning we will provide the state a service, which is free legal service, in exchange for we want to get paid. We need to get paid, right? From the taxes that you collect from the community. So public defenders are seen more as like contractors versus prosecutors are the government. They are the government.
Oh, wow.
So this is actually,
wow, that's crazy. I actually never knew that.
So this is where it's sneaky, because prosecutors are sort of like a cornerstone. Like their pay is enshrined. They are enshrined.
Their position is stable.
Their position is stable, and it is. But they make public defenders, which is a very important role, a sort of subcontractor role, harder for y'all to get paid, slower for y'all to get your money, as opposed to prosecutors like, yo, here's your money, baby. Keep getting them back, the brown people.
Yep.
That is very interesting, because you're both part of the law,
right,
but you as a public defender are treated like, specifically, purposely made difficult, even though you're both enshrined in the Constitution.
Yeah.
sneaky
Right.
mofos.
Even more
Yeah.
of like it's kind of like an employee contractor consultant situation, right? Like they treat them as employees essentially, and presumably certain benefits that come along with it, and not with the employee title, but with
Right.
the kind of attachment to the organization that is the government in this situation, versus you guys are just contracted out.
Right. I want to say it's different for other states. I
Right,
know
right.
that like there are public defender offices that they're called, you know, the office of the public or the public defender office of blah 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 county
Right.
Mm.
of that state. And
Yeah, yeah.
so I
At
think
least in New
that
York.
in
This
New
is how it works.
York,
But this is what's insane because New
That's
York is
crazy.
again the one of the biggest cities in this country
Mhm.
with the
Right.
most people, and of course, it acts like it's the shining pillar on top of the
Right.
hill of democracy, but you subcontract your public
That's
defenders.
wild.
Well, let's
Yeah.
hope Mem Donnie changes some of that.
I kind of like the contract though, because
Really?
it kind of gives
Really?
us autonomy. It gives us
Oh,
autonomy.
yeah.
You know, like you got to understand, like there's when you have prosecutors that work for the government,
Mhm.
right? Or I guess prosecutors by definition work for the government.
Mhm.
A lot of it is political. In fact,
Mm.
the
Mm.
district attorney, you have to vote. Is
Oh,
voted
yeah.
in. You
Yeah.
vote for your district attorney.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
don't vote for your public
Oh, I
defender.
see your point. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
It's a
yes.
political job. So it's I kind of
Mm.
like the autonomy. I like
Right.
the separation.
For sure.
I like, you know, being able to can I curse here?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, fuck yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I like talking my shit. I love
I
going
understand.
in a jury, in front of a jury, and just tell them why I believe, why the evidence doesn't show that my client is guilty. I love that. I love that
Okay.
freedom, that artistic freedom. And
Thank you for explaining that autonomy, that there is some value
Yes.
to it to be like, I'm independent though. I'm
right.
independent and I get, yeah, okay. I like that.
I never thought about this.
Never
That's
thought
so
about that.
crazy because you're so right. Like you do vote for your district attorney. And I've done it every single time. Like voted and
Yeah.
again, just kind of looked up whoever was a decent person and just to go that route, right? And
Yeah.
but you're right. It is a political position where you have to like lobby for yourself and have certain relationships and cater to and placate and like it.
And
yeah.
the prosecutors you put in place have to follow your political agenda.
Right.
And if you have more of a Republican district attorney, you're going to start
Mhm.
criminalizing more people of color. If you
Right.
have, like, we live in a city that has a very progressive district attorney, you know, we can see crimes going down, people getting the help they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for explaining to us. I learned a lot. Hopefully you did too, audience at home. Remember to follow, subscribe, hit like. Millie's informing.
You know what's funny? You pointed to the camera, and I thought you were pointing because I was looking at this thing, and I'm like, he's pointing to me. I'm like, I did learn. Actually,
I'm looking to the audience. Audience. I look down because I'm looking at Millie, but when I look at the camera, I'm looking at the audience.
It's funny. So yeah, so that's a perfect example of how this criminal justice system might be tailored a little bit to benefit certain people, especially now knowing that there's this political component to literally being a prosecutor, the person that is pursuing the charges against different people.
Wait, who's the DA right now in New York?
In Manhattan, because it's every borough has its own.
Whoa,
district
that
attorney.
is. I thought New York had like okay.
Yeah, it's every
man,
county. It's every county,
Every
right?
county.
So yeah, so the district attorney.
You
Well-
break down the words, you get the answers, people, by the questions.
That's right. Right, because when you're in state court and you're dealing with the prosecutor, their title is ADA, Assistant
Right.
District Attorney.
Yeah,
Mm,
not
They
the
assist the district attorney, and that's
Exactly.
the person that you vote for.
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
And so the district attorney in Manhattan is Alvin Bragg.
Alvin Bragg. Okay.
That's right.
How we feel about Alvin?
You know, I voted for him because I'm a resident of New York County.
Yeah.
And so
He's doing his job.
there's I'll say this. There's been a lot of cases that are now in treatment, which of course I appreciate because there's more of an understanding of, by slapping on a sentence, you're not solving the issue. You're
Right.
just solving a symptom and not getting to the root, which is addiction, right?
Mhm.
New York City has a huge addiction problem. You know this when you ride the subway, when you're
Mhm.
in Times Square, it's very evident. And so I will say that the treatment courts have been utilized now, in my experience, more now than they have been in the past.
Good. Okay.
And
That
so
Good.
makes
it has
sense.
been very helpful, and he has been very helpful in that way. I
Good.
wish more cases went into treatment court. That's a different conversation.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you look at the reasons why people commit crimes, right? And compare that the types of crimes that wealthy people commit versus that of low income people. We kind of touched on it earlier, Millie. You mentioned that it comes from a need based versus really a want or an insidious place, right? When we're talking about the wealthy, it's just kind of that they can, right? So, but looking at some sources in terms of why do the wealthy commit crimes and certain reasoning behind it, pulling up a Business Insider article entitled, quote, "The Illegal Maneuvers the Rich Use to Get Richer." This is dated September 13, 2024. Just from this quick summary of the article there, we see towards the bottom, we see that tax evasion and insider trading are among the most common crimes the rich commit, right? And which, as this LA defense attorney in the article points out, the rich do out of sheer greed, right?
Mhm.
It's not a need based, it's not because oh, I have no food, nothing to go home to. No, you just have more than enough money
Mhm.
and want more.
Mhm.
And let's be real, this is also why people are calling for what do you call it? The abolishing of billionaires?
Yeah, abolish billionaires because it is, and again, we said this kind of a little bit in the beginning, but they're not all crime is is created equally. That's why we have different levels and
Right.
different degrees and everything. But also, like for me, when I first heard, and this is kind of, I'm bringing up a celebrity here.
Mhm.
When I first heard that Winona Ryder loves stealing, like, and that she only did it absolutely for the thrill of stealing, that's when I was like, oh, rich people do things for a very different reason than black and brown people. Like I know people who have stolen to eat,
Right.
to have money, to buy diapers for their children.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And that's why I say a lot of societal issues are just people needing things.
Mhm.
I know people, when I did the story on TikTok, people call me soft. Somebody broke it. Some homeless person broke into my car and stole my laptop. Was I mad at the homeless person? No, because they are hungry and they saw an opportunity. You know who I'm mad at? The cops who took 8 hours to show up and then afterwards acted like I was the idiot for calling them. Do you know what I mean? NYPD's like, well, yo, where's the guy? And I'm like, where's the guy? You guys he robbed me 8 hours ago. I've
That's
called
so
you
funny.
14 times. It was below 0 degrees in the winter.
Oof.
That's who I'm angry at. The cops basically treating me like I'm the idiot for even leaving my laptop in the back. Do you know what I mean? So that's
Right.
where it's like I understand somebody doing something for need.
Mhm.
What I'm so baffled by is everything of rich people just
Get away with.
getting away with. And again, we talk about corporate greed and we talk about money, being taken from workers and, oh, they got to pay back for polluting a river. That's where I sort of, my imagination went as far as rich people crime. Having a multi-decade, sex ring was not even in my bingo card, which is weird.
Yeah, and not only just sex ring, like involving children and
Children and
again,
and
allegations of all the crazy
allegation of
things.
all this stuff.
Right.
So that's why it's like it's going back to your question, like it's the crimes that the rich commit do not compare to the needs that people do, which cause them to have to, commit a crime.
Mhm.
What a privilege to be
What a
able to
privilege.
commit a crime just because you want to. Like just to
I've never
steal,
even thought about it that way.
just to steal from the store because it gives you the thrill, just to abuse a child just because it satisfies a kink, as opposed to moving bricks of cocaine because you need to make rent this month, because you got 2 screaming baby mothers, because you need to pay for the immigration lawyer, and the immigration lawyer is charging you in the tens of thousands of dollars so that you can stay here. What a privilege it is to be able to dump I don't know how many gallons of oil into the Gulf and
to make
just
more money.
be
Yeah.
right, just to make more money versus having to prostitute yourself so that you can make ends meet. What a privilege that is.
Mhm.
Wow. I didn't even think about that way. That is also a privilege to commit these crimes and know you're not even going to get in trouble for it.
And
You're not
you
even
get
going to
slapped
look
with
your
a
way.
fine.
Slap with a fine. That's now it's considered just part of business. You know, now when you're like, oh, 3 billion next year, we're gonna get fined. That's just doing business now.
Right.
Yeah. You know what's worse? The government knows all this and they admitted it. So going back to this article,
Yeah.
the Treasury Department back then in this article back in 2024 gave further insight into why the wealthy commit crimes when it said, quote, because these individuals, no enforcement authorities lack the resources needed to pursue them, the consequences of their underpayments are viewed as minor. And so voluntary compliance rates tend to be lower, meaning that they're not pursuing these rich people for insider trading, for tax evasion, for all these crimes. And also, let's add on all these other crimes, right, that we just talked about, because they know that they can't afford to go after them, because they know that the wealthy can afford to pay for expensive lawyers, expensive experts, expensive resources to defend themselves. And it's something that people who cannot afford it cannot do.
Yeah.
And they know it's a quote unquote easier case if you go against people on the lower income bracket.
That is, and you're from New York, and you know, this is one of the cases that still sticks in my head. Is Khalif Browder. You know, have you heard the case?
Of course, I've heard
Of
of
course,
the
as a
case.
public defender, you know, where you see a kid be accused of stealing a book bag, wanted to prove his innocence. They send him to Rikers for something like 2 years, spend most of his time there in solitary confinement, really caused some PTSD, ultimately took his own life over an allegation of stealing a book bag, which again, he till the end, I didn't steal it. No, he didn't steal it. He didn't steal it. And then you have these files drop and these men not spend, these abusers not spend a moment behind bars. That to me made me very angry at, and La Co-Host kind of helped me out with this, with judges, because I have been in front of judges who have yelled at me and made me feel like just the smallest piece of crap in the world. And again, the Epstein files made me realize, gosh, you talk to me like that because you can, because you can chew me up and spit me out in the system, and you can send a battery ram to my door, and you could do whatever you want to me. And meanwhile, here's Epstein and Trump defying court orders left and right as the president of the United States. He's actually defying like 100 court orders a month and not a single handcuff on his hand. And that made me so like, gosh, judges can be so mean to people of color, but man, try to talk to Trump the way you talk to me, judge, and you be off that bench tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Have you seen that like dynamic in your practice, Millie?
100%. 100%.
I don't know how you handle it. I really don't.
I still feel
go to the
traumatized
jury.
for how little that judge made me feel. I'll be real with you. Like I still cry sometimes because it was a moment where I really needed some grace, and this guy just made me feel like a piece of shit.
It's like this is the saddest part, is that like whenever my clients are coming to court and they're getting reprimanded by a judge, they're already living through probably one of the worst periods of their life. If this is their first, second, or third arrest, this is not a happy time for them. I want you to think about like the worst time of your life and go back. If a family member was unfortunately diagnosed with some sort of terminal illness, if you lost your job, if you lost your home, I want you to remember what that experience was like, and now amplify that with the possibility of you having to live your days behind bars, okay? And now you have a judge on top of that, right? Just completely dehumanizing who you are. Did something happen? Perhaps. But guess what? We're not at trial, and you're not the fact finder. So until we get there, there's something called the presumption of innocence. Where's the presumption? You're supposed to assume that I'm innocent. You're supposed to, when I'm standing in front of you, if I'm the defendant and I'm standing in front of you, you know, Judge Che, you're supposed to assume that I have done nothing wrong, that I am completely innocent of the charges. Why? Because the government, the prosecutors, have not proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt yet. We're not at that stage of the case yet. And what happened to Khalif Browder is a tragedy, right? When we have, and you know, a lot has changed since with bail reform, particularly because of what happened to Khalif Browder. Still, we see judges just assuming the opposite.
Right.
Oh, he's guilty.
Yeah.
How dare you do this? I can't believe you did. Whoa.
Yeah.
Juror number 14, you're not, this isn't trial.
Yeah. And I'm sure that quick judgment is reserved for certain people.
Right.
100%.
Always.
And it depends on the crime. And it depends on the crime. Because if you're charged with a domestic violence case and you just happen to be a man of color, you're going to get a very different treatment, very different reprimand than if you were another gender or another race.
Wow.
Interesting.
Unfortunately, not surprising.
Not surprising, but it's good to see it, you know, from your side, because, you know, as somebody who has been, you know, on that side of the court, as somebody like you sometimes feel a little crazy. Like, is this real? Is this really happening? Am I feeling this bias and racism? Am I feeling all this? And, you know, you can't be like, hey, judge, I think you're being racist, but you just gotta like just sit with it. And it's good to be like, no, these things, again, most of them are white, most of them are prosecutors, most of them come from the affluent side of Manhattan. You know, they're there very much judging people from their same city who do not have the same opportunities as them.
Yeah.
And that's what's heartbreaking.
And what's worse is that, at least at the federal level, and Millie, I'm curious what you've seen, if you've seen this at the state level in New York, but what's worse is that it looks like at least federal prosecutors are not prosecuting white collar crimes as often. And again, not surprising, right? So pulling up a report by TRAC, which is Syracuse University's data gathering, data research, and data distribution organization. This report is entitled Federal Prosecution of White Collar Crimes Receiving Less and Less Attention. This is dated May 23rd, 2025. And it provides that as of May 31st, 2025, federal efforts to prosecute white collar crimes have continued to decline. So let's look at some data. This data provides that U.S. attorney offices filed 4,332 prosecutions for white collar crimes in fiscal year 2024, which is less than half of the 10,269 prosecutions filed in fiscal year 1994. And fiscal year 2025 is projected to fall even further to just 3,862 cases.
3,000? I'm surprised they did any this year. I mean, last
past year, yeah.
That's crazy.
And under the subheading there, comparing prosecution rates, we see that, quote, all prosecution rates except for immigration dropped substantially in the first half of fiscal year 2025.
Hold up. That is a huge. That is huge. All prosecution dropped except immigration. So more criminals are actually in the streets. In theory.
Oh, no. Well, it again, we like to flag educated guesses.
So I'm being educated.
Yes.
So this is hella educated guessing that.
Hella educated. That's what you say.
Educated.
So this hella educated is saying you going after less criminals. There's more criminals out there.
Right, because if you think about it, there's only so many resources that law enforcement have, right?
And they've all been pushed to immigration, FBI, CIA, MSNBC, and Men in Black. You know what I mean? They're all on immigrant. Well, they're always on Alien, the Men in Black, but
yeah. So no, it's actually shocking to. I guess it's shocking, but not, right, because the numbers play out what we've been seeing. The numbers play out what we've been seeing in the news and culturally all of last year, right? That all the focus has been on prosecuting immigration cases.
Yes, but you, La Co-Host, bringing up this graph and showing that not just white collar crimes are being prosecuted less. We would understand that.
Oh, wait, no, I got a better stat for you. Here's the chart.
Okay.
So in that same study, we find that prosecutors have filed charges in over 90% of immigration cases. That's the green line that we see there. Every year since fiscal year 2002. And between 70 and 80% of drug-related cases, that's the purple line there, until drug cases dropped to 50% in fiscal year 2025. Again, and we'll get to it, but the shift of focusing on immigration. Meanwhile, white-collar crimes have been prosecuted approximately 30 to 50% of the time since 1986.
Mhm.
But if you look at civil rights offenses all the way at the bottom, prosecutors have historically pursued those the least amount of times from the crimes covered in this chart.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, if we look at, for example, civil rights sits all the way down here, right? That's
Right.
the one they least pursue, which I guess is very telling of how the state
Of
protects our
course.
rights. You
Wow.
know, white collar
Right.
crime sits right above that with, you know, even
Mhm.
less. But then immigration all the time. They
All the
prosecute
time. Of
everything.
course.
Narcotics and drugs, all categories, everything else.
But no, but the drop is still very significant over the last year. That
Mhm.
is unreal. I mean, we already knew they were in. Yeah. Whoa, what just happened? Oh, the camera just flipped. Sorry about that.
And if you keep in mind that the FBI is the lead investigative agency in many white collar crime investigations, and as we may remember, the Trump administration ordered the FBI to prioritize immigration
Whoa.
and deprioritize white collar cases, as described further in this Reuters article entitled, quote, FBI ordered to prioritize immigration as DOJ scales back white collar crimes or white collar cases dated May 12, 2025. This was an explicit, like, this is a directive from the administration.
Yo, okay. I'm sorry, Millie. I know you came in, but like co-host is blowing my mind with a lot of this because it was like also my first time seeing it. So I have to say this, that okay, so the man understood that the Epstein files and everybody involved with that, essentially the FBI was the lead investigating agency and all those kinds of things. So to make the entire MAGA fan base be like, we need to move every single resource to immigration,
Mhm.
he moved heaven and earth to just go after innocent brown people so his white buddies can get away with literally all the crimes.
Mhm.
Holy crap, MAGA. You
That's
guys.
what they're focused on. That's what they're focused on. This is how they
MAGA.
make America great again, by removing all those people that they don't want.
Mhm.
And let
And
the
they can commit
white
whatever
criminals
white
run
collars
amok.
they want to do.
Mhm.
We're not profitable for them. Immigrants are viewed as not profitable for them, which is insane because
Insane.
it's the opposite.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
You two are blowing my mind today.
So
Jesus.
apparently the FBI agents were told back then by their field offices that they needed to start devoting 1/3 of their time to helping with
Unbelievable.
immigration enforcement, and that pursuing white collar cases will be deprioritized for at least the remainder of 2025. My guess is that's going to be for the next couple of years under Cheeto,
Yeah.
but
Wow.
yeah, so it's not as if you look at that stat together with what we just saw in terms of prosecution numbers, right? Like that's not really surprising. And again, by design by this administration to make up the emergency that again, immigrants are invading and we have to do something, and all forces should be going towards that. Yeah, so your friends could do everything else.
Yeah. With the drop of the Epstein files, this all seems a lot more calculated and nefarious than even previously imagined.
Yeah. So I guess Millie, I'm curious on your experience of the how often you see cases pursued against your clients versus to the extent that you've seen cases pursued or not pursued against wealthier people, right? Like how often are you seeing that dynamic come up?
All of my clients are indigent clients, are folks that can't afford their own attorney. So the majority of the cases that are pending in state court are these cases that these defendants that are indigent. And so they're not being charged with fraud or any kind of like traditional white collar crime. First of all, most white collar crimes are federal crimes. Let's start there, right? Because of commerce and the way that the way that our laws function. Most white collar crimes are prosecuted in federal court.
Conveniently.
There are some white collar crimes that are charged in state court. But again, I don't see many of them because our clients are not the ones committing them.
Yeah.
Our people are not the ones doing that. They're
I
not
figured
the
as
ones,
much.
right?
Yeah.
Like we're just trying to make it day by day.
Yes.
Exactly.
We're not thinking, oh, if I put this in this document, I'm gonna get millions of dollars or something like that. It's very rare that it happens. Very,
Right.
very rare. I have
Of course.
handled some white collar crimes, some,
Yeah.
but for the most part, not really.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of people that come to you like running like the Ponzi schemes or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
not, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. Yes, we should still go after. We want justice. We should go after people who are hurting each other. But like an immigrant or anybody committing a crime of like stealing food or having to do anything like that doesn't hurt the community as large as like these white collar crimes that people don't really see like that, because you're stealing from
That's
your
the
community,
difference.
your state, your country, not paying back into it. It's stealing from a lot of people in that sense, which also causes people to not be able to have the resources that they need, which
Right.
causes them to have to. Do you understand? So
Yeah.
the theft of the wealth from the wealthy really adds a lot to the crimes that people have to commit out of
Yeah.
necessity.
Right.
Yeah, it trickles down. It affects all of
That's
us.
the trickle down economy that they don't want you to know. The
There
more
you
they
go.
have, the less people have, so the more crimes that's the trickle down
Right.
economy.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the trickle down.
Yeah.
Trickle down economy.
And
yeah.
actually, speaking of resources, this kind of brings us into our next topic. It's interesting because Millie and I kind of fall on the spectrum industry-wise in the legal community, given her public defense work versus my past experience working for a private law firm. And there is a real difference in the resources available to lawyers in each of these areas. And I often say that a lot of the stereotypes that go along with each of them are just availability of resources, right? Like there's something to be said about having different experts readily available, about having a large law firm of different departments of subject matter experts that I can just pop into their office, right? Of having a mail room that's dedicated to making copies for me, and I don't have to deal with that. Of having a whole administrative team, secretaries, all these different people that can handle filings for me, paralegals that are incredible in their own right and can function as lawyers on their own. That is the world that I was functioning within. While yes, working weekends and working late hours in the same way that Millie does, right? But it's easier for me and more efficient for me to get my job done given all these resources, right? So this is this really high level, the field of private law firm life. It varies depending on how big the firm is, etc. But those are the types of resources that are available to the types of lawyers that the wealthy tend to hire, right? Because they have those resources available. Now, Millie, give us a little insight into the types of resources or lack thereof that you may have.
I'm so jealous.
I'm
of
so
you.
sorry. I had to do it. I'm so sorry.
I love that. No, that's not to take away the services and the resources that you have. I just wish we had that too. You know what I mean?
And that's what I'm saying. It's so heartbreaking where honestly, y'all probably need it more.
This is the difference between having the resources and not having the resources. The government, the prosecutors, they have detectives, they have police officers, they even have their own officers within the district attorney. Like they have police officers that only work with the prosecutors. Okay.
Oh wow, that's
I had no idea.
Yes.
There's no law and order prosecutors unit.
Wouldn't that be nice? They have access to some of the smartest people when it comes to technology, being able to break into someone's cell phone and search the entire cell phone. Okay. They have people who are able to piece together large and voluminous discovery or evidence and make it into one cohesive PowerPoint presentation so that the jury can follow cohesively their theory.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
I am my client's investigator, divorce lawyer, real estate. I'm their landlord-tenant lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm their family lawyer. I'm their immigration lawyer. I'm their criminal lawyer. In many instances, I'm their mother and I'm telling them what to do.
Yeah. You're the counselor.
I'm playing all of these roles and I got to prepare for trial. And I have to be able to come up with arguments and research and understand that if the prosecutor is going to call an expert in DNA or in gunshot residue or in microscopy, however you say that, I have to be just as smart for me to be able to cross-examine that witness so that the jury
Yeah.
can really critically think about this expert's level or this expert's area of expertise. Otherwise, it's going to go in one ear and out the other, and then that's it. And they're only going to get what the prosecutor is presenting to them.
That's crazy.
And this usually falls on you to have to kind of figure out what kind of DNA stuff they're bringing up and all that.
Yeah.
Or do you also have the resources to get a scientist to be like, nah, they lying?
So I think that depending on the type of case, right? I can't do this for every case, but if it's like a homicide, right? Then yeah, we'll be able to get an expert to review the evidence, the forensic evidence, and perhaps even give us some sort of like independent report separate than what the prosecutor has already provided, right?
Yeah.
That's not happening in every case. And it better be worth it. In other words, if my defense is that someone else did it and not he didn't die by gunshot, there's no justification for me to spend the money and the resources to get an expert.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So-
and the prosecutor can like bring in whatever they want because they have the resources, the money, the cops,
Right.
the lab.
This is the government.
They can throw everything your way. Here's the public defender going, I gotta find a fingerprint, dude.
Right. It's and he needs to be as smart, if not smarter than their expert. Otherwise, why am I hiring him?
You don't want a janky fingerprint, dude.
And you're doing all of this with like how many cases, right? Because public defenders handle hundreds of cases at a time, roughly, right? Like you guys are managing a lot of cases to try to do this with every single one of them. That's impossible.
And that's one of the hugest disparities in the criminal justice system is, and you know, I really do try to be available for my clients as much as I can be, but I'm a human being as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so when I have 40, 50 clients, and clients can have more than one case.
Right. Right.
Wow.
Right? Think about all the steps and all the things that need to happen for me to be an effective defense attorney, right? I need to be able to investigate, to research, to file motions, to make arguments. The arguments have to make sense, right? And I need to do that for each individual client. Whereas if you're a private attorney and you have the means to hire a private attorney, you're one of 10 clients.
Correct.
If that.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you wonder why the rich, we never hear about the crimes of the rich.
Right.
Yeah. And not only that, but like going back to subject matter experts, I personally didn't have to be an expert in all the different things. If there was an IP issue, I could just pop into so-and-so's office and be like, hey, IP expert. Or if there's an environmental issue, hey, environmental person. Or if there's a whatever, like in the corporate space, it's very designed to try to be as seamless as possible. Like granted, yes, it has its own issues in different ways. But in terms of resources and availability to expedite things, they try to make it to make the client's money worth it, right? So that's why they pay the big bucks or whatever. But it's ridiculous that justice and your ability to defend yourself is entirely dependent on your ability to afford a lawyer, especially when public defenders are doing incredible work with very little. And segueing to my next one, making it worse are people that are in that system, right? So pulling up an article from the Queen's Daily Eagle entitled "Former Queen's Defenders Boss Admits to Stealing Over $100,000 from Nonprofit." This is dated February 3rd, 2026. So this is Lori Zeno. I didn't want anyone to confuse the other people thinking that, oh, maybe Lori is a guy. No, it's this woman.
That's Lori Zeno. That white lady, she stole a lot of money from public defenders.
So she is the co-founder and former executive director of Queen's Defenders, which is a taxpayer-funded nonprofit that provides legal defense services to New Yorkers who can't afford to pay for a lawyer. And why is she the former executive director? Well, she recently admitted in court to stealing over $100,000 from Queen's Defenders, meaning that she's stealing money from the ability to represent indigent defendants. Like
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking that we have someone who was working within the system, who founded an organization that supposedly was meant to help people
Mm-hmm.
and created it just to feed her
Yeah.
pockets.
Yeah. This is another thing. Not only do we have rich, affluent white people getting away with crimes, then we have rich, affluent white people making pretend they're allies, coming in and stealing from our communities and making it even harder for us in that way.
Mhm.
It's so disappointing.
Disappointing.
It's so disappointing because, you know, we public defenders get into this work because we want to help and serve our communities, right? And
Mhm.
that money is necessary. We
Yeah.
need that money for salaries. We need that money for investigations.
Yep.
We need that money for reentry when our clients get released and they have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And to use your position of power and for your own personal gain, you just fed into the rhetoric that we're not here for the community, and that's just not the case.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so disappointing.
Yeah. And again, like keeping in mind that this is an organization similar to what Millie described, right? That didn't have a lot of resources already. And now you have the founder and executive director taking advantage of the little that they had and filling her pockets with it. It's just, it's insane that there's people working within the system.
Do you know what I could have done with $100,000?
I'm saying that could have gone to some loans.
That
No, helping
I hired
people.
like two to three assistants, trial assistants, to just do like evidence sorting. Like, do you know what you could do with that money for you to take it for personal gain? That's horrible.
Yeah.
For another house you don't need.
Exactly.
When there's people out there and don't have one.
Yeah. So the last section we're getting into is the intersectionality of people who serve as jurors and who are defendants, right? So like we kind of touched on it a little bit throughout the episode so far, but let's get into a example actually out of New York. So pulling up an article by the publication The City. This is entitled State Commission Examples Examines Lack of Diversity on Jury Panels. This is dated December 15th, 2025. The article starts out with a conversation with Manhattan public defender Eric Burrs, who said that in a panel of roughly 70 potential jurors in Manhattan criminal court, he didn't see one Black juror in the room, and his client in that case was Black. So obviously an incredibly uncomfortable position for not only him, but obviously his client to be walking into potentially a bunch of bias against who he is. The article explains that juries in New York's criminal court system do not represent an actual cross-section of the community in the way that juries are supposed to. They flag that hourly workers can't afford to miss wages. Parents without childcare can't leave their children alone. And of course, people with felonies aren't allowed to serve on juries. These are obviously just some examples of the demographics that may not be able to be present at a jury for different reasons, but valid nonetheless. So consequently, a lot of juries in New York's criminal court system tend to be wealthier and whiter. And as we've heard so far, the likelihood of our defendants in these cases being people of color is pretty high, since cases aren't likely to be pursued against the wealthy, right? So defendants in New York have tried to argue this point too, actually, but it hasn't always been successful, unfortunately. Pulling up a Reuters article entitled New York Federal Court's Jury System Upheld Despite, quote, Troubling Racial Disparities. This is dated August 8th, 2024. So in 2023, a Black man named Alva Slaughter was convicted of a gun offense in federal trial court in Manhattan. He appealed that decision to the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals because he claimed that the systemic underrepresentation of Black and Latino people as eligible jurors affected the jury's decision. The appeals court, unfortunately, did not agree with him and upheld the conviction. His lawyers tried to argue that while Black people comprise 19... Sorry, hold on.
21.19? No worries.
I thought that was a typo on my end. Sorry. His lawyers tried to argue that while Black people comprise 21.19% of the jury eligible population in the court's district, only 16.8% of potential jurors in the Manhattan court were Black. Hispanic or Latino people comprise 28.44% of the relevant voters, yet only 19.41% of the jury population. As a result, his lawyers argued that his rights under the Sixth Amendment and the Jury Selection and Service Act of 1968 were violated. So this is just one example of someone in New York specifically trying to argue this point. But Millie, I guess I'm curious on if you can share how you've seen jury selection impact a defendant's case.
So I have the privilege to have practice in 2 different counties.
Okay.
Mhm.
And if you're from New York, you know how different Queens and Manhattan are from each other.
Mhm.
Queens forever, by the way.
Are you from Queens? That's dope. Yeah. Queens is just this melting pot of
Mhm.
cultures and religions and nations. It's one street, you're in Cali, Colombia, you cross the
Mhm.
street, and all of a sudden you're in Pakistan. It's
Yeah.
so diverse. And jury trial practice in Queens looked so different than Manhattan,
Mhm.
where it's not as diverse, but you have pockets. You have like
Mm.
enclaves.
Mhm.
Enclaves.
Enclaves, yeah,
Enclaves.
English is my second language. We're still learning.
Mhm.
Crushing it.
In all over Manhattan, right? You
Mhm.
have some areas that are Chinatown. You have Uptown that's called Little Dominican Republic, East
Mm.
Harlem, El Barrio, right? So
Mhm.
you have like different pockets of groups of ethnic groups. What happens is that we're over policing those areas. So most defendants are Black and brown people,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
then you're sending jury summonses throughout the entire borough. So
Right.
first you have to have an address. Second, you have to understand English enough to know that you've been
Mm.
summoned to do jury duty. Third, you have to understand English to actually get on the panel, and just the things that you've
Mm.
And be a
mentioned,
juror.
you can't be a felon. You have to be a United States citizen. That citizenship is required. You
Mhm.
have to live in Manhattan. Like there are certain requirements for you to even qualify. And already you're discounting a huge number of
Mhm.
Black and brown people that could have served in your
Mm.
jury but can't because of these rules. And so you'll have a resident of Soho judging a Harlem robbery. You'll have
Mm.
a resident of Tribeca judging a Lower East Side rape case. And
Mm.
Mm.
so that disconnect, that cultural disconnect in Manhattan in particular, makes it
Mm.
that much harder to try to have them understand, listen, my client was defending himself because
Yeah.
unfortunately he doesn't live in Tribeca. He doesn't
Yeah.
live in a high rise in Soho. He lives in El Quinto Diablo of Harlem, where he needs to watch his back
Yeah.
if
Mhm.
he's going to the bodega to get a bacon, egg, and cheese.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not the same. You
Mhm.
need to have that cultural sensitivity. You need to understand why it is that he felt that he needed to defend himself.
Mhm.
And do you know how incredibly difficult it is for defense attorneys to try to convey that to
Yeah.
jurors?
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
so difficult unless you understand or live that lifestyle. You don't understand what it means to have to defend yourself when you're going to the bodega to buy a bacon, egg, and cheese. You don't
Yeah.
know.
Exactly. And for those that are listening, that people are like, well, it doesn't matter what was the reason. It actually
It
does, right?
does.
Because intent, as we know, and from what I remember from law school,
Right.
is a big part of criminal law, right? And is an element of it. And
Mhm.
there's a reason why it's factored in. And for that same reason, any kind of biases or any kind of perceptions that you may be coming into as a juror, as a potential prosecutor, as even a public defender, right? Like any kind of these biases need to be taken into account, especially when we're looking at the demographics of the people that are falling into these spaces.
And it's also it's incredible to me that in 2026, Manhattan is still operating very much like, 1790 time of enslavement, where you bring in a person of color and the judge, jury, and everyone is white, affluent people who don't understand this person's lived experience or come in with so much unfortunately hatred or bias, even though they don't
Right.
want to admit it, that they've already made up their mind about this person because you've never had their experience, you never had their life. We're not trying to say that justifies their action, but at
Right.
least context and nuance and
It might
understanding what
justify their actions. We
Mhm.
have the defense
yes,
is called
Depending on
sorry, yes,
justification.
absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely, it absolutely does justify their actions. You know what I mean? We still have to want to hold people accountable, but we need to understand why it happened, where they came
Right.
from, and what state of mind they were in.
Right.
And it does
Right.
feel so, again, just goes back to time of enslavement, where the judge is an affluent, usually white person, jury's mostly white, and the prosecutor's also white, and it's just like you're there to feel almost like this dehumanized, just try to dehumanize you and defeat
Right.
you before you even get your day in court.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I don't
on
know
that,
how do we fix that? I don't even know. Like,
I think we fix by actually holding billionaires and rich people accountable.
that's what it is. It has to be so well, there's a lot of intersectionalities of it, as
Yeah.
I'm sure, Billy, you can attest to better than we can for sure. But it
Sure.
starts with systemic change, right?
It
And to
does.
that, you have to, it is the top-down dynamic, right? We have to start figuring out how to properly hold people accountable. That's why kind of circling back and tying things up, going back to Epstein, right? It's really interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how things pan out. Hopefully, there's a change in the tide in terms of accountability, in terms of actual justice and what that looks like. And hopefully we have a upcoming election.
And what this
We'll
shows,
see.
what this shows also, you
That's
can have
so
buddies
scary.
from the same class, from the same class ruling everything because they look out for each other and do nefarious things. That's why you
Exactly.
need people from different backgrounds, also different jobs, different fields. You said prosecutors and public defenders to be,
Yeah,
judges, not just wealthy prosecutors who are chumming up with the rich folk.
exactly.
Wouldn't that be
And
nice?
yeah, and tying it back to our last episode with End Citizens United, that's why efforts need to be made, right, on a political landscape as well, to
Yeah.
not have the wealthy being able to influence that, because that's another intersection. So it's a really convoluted issue, but I feel like pretty straightforward. You just gotta start with the wealthy.
Start with the wealthy, and you'll see a lot of changes. Start taxing and actually, putting them in jail, and you'll see.
Yeah.
Millie, thank you so much for your time. Anything else you want to leave the people with before we get out of here? I know public defender, you can't be like, follow me on public defender at y'all, I'll get you out. You know what I mean?
No, I think that the work that you're doing is just so important. And I think that this platform is very important for people to just kind of like digest and understand how our society works. We tend to like feel very disconnected, like this is not my world, so I don't really care. But you live in this community, this is the life that you live. You have a neighbor. It's important that we understand that, right? Like being able to connect with our people, that is what's important. And you're doing that with this podcast. You're connecting with them and explaining to them so that they understand what's going on and they understand their rights.
Thank you, Millie.
Thank you.
And thank you for all your work and protecting people and still having a heart for people, even though it's tough and you may say a lot of things, but you still have a heart to look out for good people. So please don't ever lose that kindness that you have. And stay Latina and awesome, yo. Like that's awesome. Yo, while you do it. Bad Money taught us last weekend, yo, you could do anything.
I love
stay
it.
Latino.
That's right. That's right. Latino every lifetime, baby.
All day.
Hey, thank you so much for your time, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Say bye, like a host.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Thanks
Millie.
for listening.
Bye.